there's one on what about physician-assisted suicide. It's an article that I wrote for the new What About series that they're coming out with through the Office of National Mission, Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. So it discusses a little bit about physician-assisted suicide. And then there are a few pamphlets as well. One on our philosophy program at Concordia University, Wisconsin, one of the universities of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. We have an excellent philosophy program. One on the Concordia Center for Bioethics, of which I'm the director, so feel free to take a look at that. And then also one on the International Academy of Apologetics, Evangelism and Human Rights. And I'll talk about that in just a little bit. And then also a flyer on the graduate certificate in bioethics, which we offer through the Center for Bioethics. So I'm going to do a few commercials before we start, and then we'll get into the presentation. So a little bit about me. Probably most of you don't know who I am, but I was actually a practicing veterinarian for 14 years up in a little town called Bondwell, Wisconsin. So up in northeast Wisconsin is where I met my wife, Kay, who's sitting over there with Dr. Lowski, and met her there. And then unfortunately, as time went by, I started having difficulties in practice. And one of the problems I had was asthma. And had some allergy tests done and found out that I was allergic to my patients. So it was hard to continue in practice that way. And then when I realized that, I was put on prednisone, that's cortisone, in order to keep the asthma under control. One of the side effects is it can weaken your bone structure. One day a cow kicked me and broke my leg in 3 places. So that gave me some time to think. And my pastor actually encouraged me to think about a second career in the ministry because I'd been active in our local church. And that's what we did. Ended up selling my share of the practice and moved here to St. Louis, where I attended seminary for 4 years. And then when I finished here, several faculty members, and I know Professor Gibbs was encouraging as well, to think about maybe teaching bioethics going into academia. So then I transferred from here to St. Louis University, who happened to have a 4-year PhD program in healthcare ethics. And so before I could even finish there, then Concordia University found out about me and called me up there. So there I'm back in the state of Wisconsin. So I guess one could say that actually a cow kicked me into the ministry. When I took summer Greek from Dr. Voss, he loved that story. He always called me the kicked by the cow guy. That's how he remembered me. So as you can see, like most ethicists, I kind of have an eclectic background, in medicine, theology, philosophy, health law, public health, statistical research, and ethics. And so I'm currently director of the Center for Bioethics at Concordia University. That's what I used to do. I had to put a veterinary slide on there. So what I do is much cleaner now as comparing to having examining cows like that. But I enjoyed veterinary practice, but I also enjoy what I'm doing here today. By the way, I just saw online, hopefully my presentation will hold your interest, but I was just kind of looking around online today and saw a little story that I thought was kind of cute about the ministry and paying attention, that sort of thing. A new minister stood at the church door greeting members as they left the Sunday morning service. Most of the people were very generous, telling the pastor how much they liked his message, except for one man who said, "This was a very dull and boring sermon, Pastor." Then a few minutes later, the same man came back and said, "I don't think you did much preparation for your message." And then once again, a few minutes later, the man reappeared, this time muttering, "You really blew it. You didn't have a thing to say, Pastor." Well, finally, the minister couldn't stand it any longer, so he asked one of the elders about that man. And the elder said, "Oh, don't let that guy bother you. He's just a little slow. All he does is go around repeating whatever he hears other people saying." So that didn't really help him feel any better. So hopefully that won't be the case here. Well, I'm director of the Center for Bioethics, so here's my little commercial. The mission statement of the Center for Bioethics is that it is a Christian academic center applying God's word to issues involving biology and healthcare. That's what bioethics is, the study of ethical issues involving not just healthcare, but also biology as well, through teaching, service, and research. And we just about a year and a half ago started offering academic programs. We offer a minor in bioethics for Concordia students who have an interest in that. Then we also offer a graduate certificate in bioethics that you might be interested in. And that's the one flyer that was at the table over there. It was developed by the Center for Bioethics and the Department of Theology and Philosophy. Useful for those who face ethical questions that inevitably rise in the healthcare setting. Testifies its holder has completed an intensive program of graduate study. So this is a graduate certificate. It's not a master's degree, but it's more than a bachelor's degree. And it has studies in moral theory, decision-making procedures and ethics, and the current literature of bioethics. Gives participants experience in the practical application of moral principles, ethical theory, and the law. And then if for students who are students at Concordia, if they're earning a master's or doctoral degree, they can do it together with that. One point I want to mention is that this program's totally offered online. The times are completely flexible, so it's designed to fit into people's busy lifestyle. And it consists of 5 courses. And here are the 5 courses, 15 credits altogether. Moral reasoning and bioethics, taught by Dr. Gregory Schultz of our faculty. Clinical issues in bioethics, I teach that course. Bioethics and biotechnology, taught by Professor Robert Fleischman, Director of Christian Life Resources. Bioethics and the law, taught by an attorney in California, Christian attorney. And then policy issues in bioethics, I teach that as well. So that's a graduate certificate in bioethics. So that's my first commercial. So if you have an interest, feel free to come up afterwards and ask me about that. Another faculty member of ours, Professor John Warwick Montgomery, you probably have heard of him. He's got more doctoral degrees and other degrees than you can imagine. He's written probably in excess of 50 books. He's been writing about apologetics for over 50 years now, I believe. And apologetics is simply the defending the faith, you know, particularly in the world, but also answering Christians' questions about such things as the reliability of Scripture, things like that. He offers an intensive 2-week program in Strasbourg, France. So if you want to get away in the middle of summer, go to Strasbourg, France. He actually gives you a couple sightseeing tours, and you have a weekend off to go explore. Of course, you can come early and go touring. That's what Kay and I did one year. We went to Paris for about a week before we started the academy. But then you get to hear top-level speakers on Christian apologetics. So there are 2 main speakers and then also invited scholars who come on board as well. So you might want to think about that. I've got brochures over there on the table for you. The International Academy of Apologetics, Evangelism, and Human Rights. That's the end of my commercials. Now, what am I going to talk about? I'm going to focus mainly on physician-assisted suicide in this presentation. But first of all, it's hard to understand these issues, I believe, without appreciating what the facts are. So that's what I'll try to do, is clarify a few of the facts, and I know the physician talked about some of that as well. So we'll talk first of all a little bit about euthanasia, just to kind of set the stage for the main topic, physician-assisted suicide. Then I'd like to show you 2 videos, 2 opposing views on physician-assisted suicide. One by Brittany Maynard, which she made in 2014. And how many of you remember her at all? Okay, so some of you, so we'll show that. And then Maggie Carner, who is director of LCMS Life Ministries, who also was facing an end-of-life situation. Different view on physician-assisted suicide. Then we'll talk about the ethics of euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide. And if we have time, I'll show you a bill from the state of Wisconsin. There's not one in Missouri right now, but the state of Wisconsin actually has a bill trying to legalize physician-assisted suicide. Here are some resources that I used putting together this presentation. One document that's free online at lcms.org/CTCR, that stands for the Commission on Theology and Church Relations. That's a board or commission of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod that studies social issues. Maybe most of you are familiar with it, but a document called Christian Care at Life's End. It's a little bit dated now, but it's still got some excellent theological principles that still apply. A book by one of my colleagues who is the previous director of the Bioethics Center, Richard Eyre, Holy People, Holy Lives, Law and Gospel and Bioethics, published by CPH. Bernard, if you have an interest in medical ethics, the #1 medical ethics textbook used at medical schools is by Bernard Lowe, Resolving Ethical Dilemmas, a guide for clinicians, and you can order it on Amazon. Gilbert Meilander, I have his book here. He's probably, or was one of the most prominent bioethicists in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. He actually sat on President Bush's commission on bioethics, so very prominent, and from Valparaiso, wrote a primer, Bioethics, a Primer for Christians, 3rd edition, so I have that up here if you wanted to look at that later. Another book that came out just relatively recently, also available on lcms.org/life, is a book by John Pless, one of our seminary professors at the Fort Wayne campus, who sits on the Sanctity of Human Life Committee with me. He wrote a book called Mercy at Life's End, a guide for laity and their pastors, and it's a very short document, easy to read and understand and follow. And then a couple of handy websites, lutheransforlife.org and also christianliferesources.com. Some handy tools available there. So, some background definitions. And I know this was discussed a little bit earlier, but physician-assisted suicide and euthanasia. Euthanasia actually comes from 2 Greek words meaning good death. Good death. And so it's a euphemism. And it's sometimes referred to as mercy killing. And in euthanasia, a physician plays a direct role in the patient's death, typically through a lethal injection. Whereas physician-assisted suicide, often abbreviated PAS, also called physician-assisted death or physician aid in dying, which we heard before. In that technique, a physician doesn't do the direct killing, but the physician provides the means, typically a prescription that has to be filled at a pharmacy. It's essentially an overdose, you might say an overdose of barbiturates, overdose of sleeping pills with some other medications mixed in. It's legal, PAS currently is legal in Oregon, Washington, Montana, Vermont, one county of New Mexico, which is kind of strange, and then California was the latest state. And there's a push in many states to get physician-assisted suicide legalized. Just some facts about euthanasia before we move on to PAS, which is my main topic. Currently, euthanasia is not legal anywhere in this country. Now, does it occur? Probably, but it's not legal. And it is legal, however, in the Netherlands. The Netherlands was one of the first countries to legalize it. Luxembourg, Belgium, Switzerland, they all allow what we call voluntary active euthanasia. That means decisional patient. Doctor takes an active role in the patient's death. However, Belgium, which was mentioned before, recently enacted a child euthanasia law, which allows terminal children, including babies, to be euthanized. And then that's the first ever law of that type. In fact, there have been some recent cases of minors taking advantage of that law or using that law. It is condemned by the American College of Pediatricians. So some ethicists ask, have they slid down the slippery slope? Because when they first legalized voluntary active euthanasia, most countries said, well, that's where it'll stop. We'll never allow people who are not decisional to be euthanized. And then now they have, that's starting now. Statistics, in 2011, Dutch euthanasia deaths increased. Seems every year they increase. 18% from the previous year to 3,695, and has doubled since 2006. Euthanasia now accounts for 2.8% of all Dutch deaths. Isn't that amazing? To me, it's just surprising no matter what side you stand on that issue. So now let's go to physician-assisted suicide. And the biggest proponent of physician-assisted suicide is an organization called Compassion and Choices. Compassion and Choices. Anybody know what their previous title was? What did they used to call themselves? The Hemlock Society. Yeah, Hemlock Society. So they probably thought, Well, that's a little off-putting for some, having to do with Socrates and drinking the cup of poison hemlock. That's where that reference comes from. Well, they decided let's go with something a little more user-friendly, perhaps, compassion and choices. So today, many states have compassionate choices bill. They actually have that in the title of the bill, legalizing physician-assisted suicide. I just got this yesterday, updated it off the web, and Mr. Spock is on there. Right. Yeah, I couldn't believe that. There he is. Well, he's passed away now, so I won't help him anymore. Here's a map. You might say a program map from their website. And you can check it out yourself, compassionandchoices.org. So the states that are in orange are the aid, as they call it, aid in dying statute states, so that's where it's legalized. So there's Vermont, Washington, Oregon, California. Montana was never authorized by the legislature by a judge. And the legislature has been trying to overturn it and has run into roadblocks, so far it's not been overturned. But Montana is legal as well, but by court ruling. And then you can see all the states in blue and the one in green here where there is legislation advancing, and you can see Wisconsin is one of them, and if we have time I'll go over the Wisconsin bill. You can see even in Alaska and Hawaii there are bills pending. Now, Oregon was the first state to legalize physician-assisted suicide, and they called it the Death with Dignity Act, and often abbreviated DWDA, Death with Dignity Act. And so this act is often used as a model now for all states who have followed, including Washington, for example. What are some features of that bill? There are built-in protections, but the lifespan of the patient has to be expected to be 6 months or less, and they have to have a terminal illness. However, I've heard that there have been movements now to expand that from 6 months to a year. Now, 6 months is typically the time when a person can be enrolled in hospice, so it seemed to be a natural time to put into this act, but now they seem to, that's not broad enough. They want it even broader. The prescribing physician is protected from liability. The doctor prescribes and the patient takes, that's the definition of physician-assisted suicide. A second physician's opinion is needed. There must be a written request and 2 oral requests, so written requests and 2 spoken requests by the patient. And then there's a 15-day waiting period, so they can't just go in and then request that immediately. They have to think about it and reflect about it for some time. Counseling is required if a doctor deems the patient to be depressed. So if the doctor deems that the patient has clinical depression, for example, then he or she would have to refer that person to counseling. Here's a form, a copy of the form that is used. And I know from some of your seats you probably can't see all of this, and I'm not going to read through it all, but it's online. You can check it out for yourself. So here's a request for medication to end my life in a humane and dignified manner. That's the title at the top of that form. And then the patient's name goes in here. What the illness is goes in here. And then the patient attests that I've been fully informed of my diagnosis, prognosis, nature of medication to be prescribed, and potential associated risks, the expected result, the feasible alternatives, including comfort care, hospice care, and pain control. I request that my attending physician prescribe medication that will end my life in a humane and dignified manner, and also contact my pharmacist to fill the prescription. So Concordia University has a school of pharmacy, only the second one in the state of Wisconsin. The other one's at University of Wisconsin-Madison. So our students right now are wrestling with this. What would happen if it were legalized in the state of Wisconsin? Could they ethically fill that type of prescription? So it places a burden not only on physicians and other healthcare professionals that might be called upon to assist that patient, even if they feel it's ethically wrong, but also pharmacists to fill that prescription. Here are some check boxes. Initial 1. I've informed my family of my decision and taken their opinions into consideration. Second one, I have decided not to inform my family of my decision. And the third, I have no family to inform of my decision. So what's surprising to me in this is that patients aren't required to notify their families, really. And the state of Wisconsin actually changes that provision. They make it mandatory that the families be notified. I understand I have a right to rescind this request at any time. And I understand the full import of this request, and I expect to die when I take the medications. I make this request voluntary. I accept full moral responsibility. I further understand that although most deaths occur within 3 hours, my death may take longer, and my physician has counseled me about this possibility. There are things that can go wrong during this process. For example, the patient may take the medication and then involuntarily vomit. And then that patient is not quite dead, but not, it's kind of in a comatose state. So that could be an issue. And they have to be informed about that there are, with any medical procedure, there are complications. And then here are the declaration of witnesses where the witnesses sign. And the witnesses have to say they personally know that patient, or he has provided proof of identity, that they've signed this request, that the patient signed this request in our presence on the date following the person's signature, appears to be in sound mind, not under duress, fraud, or undue influence, is not a patient for whom either of us is the attending physician. So there are the signature lines. So feel free to check that out if you will. Just some statistics on Oregon's Death with Dignity Act, which again is the model for many other states. It was first enacted in late '97, so it's been around quite a while. 132 patients died in 2015 due to the Death with Dignity Act. 218 prescriptions were written, and what's surprising to me, the ingestion status is unknown for 43 patients who received a prescription. So 43 patients received a prescription, they don't know what happened to that patient. I would think at least they would try to keep better tabs on that. And it's on their documents, published online. They have unknown category. The total number since the beginning of the Death with Dignity Act, 991. So 991 patients total have died since '97. Median patient age was 73 years old. 93% of them were white. 43% had at least a bachelor's degree, so fairly well educated. Reasons given by patients include decreasing ability to participate in enjoyable activities, 96%, loss of autonomy, 92%, and loss of dignity, 75%. Is there anything on that list that you think might be missing, that surprises you that's not there? Yeah, pain. You would think that would be the primary concern. So obviously they recognize that medicine can take care of most people's pain. In fact, ethicists have asserted, and physicians as well, that there's very few episodes of pain, no matter how intense, that medicine cannot take care of or handle. So it's mainly a loss of autonomy and loss of dignity and loss of the ability to do what they want to do. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, is it not a problem if a person has pain to sign it because he or she might be not under control of their thoughts and is able to sign it really? It's not clear.
So you mean if they are in pain and they cannot sign, can they actually sign the document? Well, they have to be determined to be decisional by the physician, so they have to be capable of making medical decisions. I would venture to say most of the time this document is signed enough ahead of time where the patient can make clear medical decisions. If they cannot make medical decisions, then an advance directive would kick in. Only 5 of the patients last year were referred to psychiatric counseling, and 3 in 2014, 2 in 2012 and 13, and then 1 patient in 2011. So very few patients are referred to psychiatric counseling for depression. And for me, that's kind of surprising too, because if I know I had a fatal illness and I might not have clinical psychoses or anything like that, or clinical depression, but I would think I'd be kind of bummed about it. Wouldn't it be helpful to see a psychiatrist over that, to make sure what they're doing here is clearly expressing their views? Do they really want to go through with this? Here's a chart. You can get it yourself. Oregon Public Health Division, 2016, just published in February. They keep good statistics, or at least they try. I mean, they don't always explain everything. But here, look at the jump Look at the increases every year since 98 is the first year on that. The blue is the number of prescriptions. The green or greenish yellow is the number of deaths. There's quite a spike right here. And I would say some of that has to do with Brittany Maynard, publicizing that. In fact, that's the next topic. I'd like to show you a brief video. It's a 6-minute video, might not get to show all of it. But Brittany Maynard received national attention. And she was educated, very well spoken, articulate, convinced many people to come to the side of pro-PAS. And she died November 1st, 2014. She had brain cancer. And she actually moved from California to Oregon, I believe it was, in order to take advantage of the Death with Dignity Act. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and play that. We'll see if we have it queued, so hopefully it'll come up. And you can see what her arguments are.
The thoughts that go through your mind when
We
you
could
find
maybe
out
make
you
it
have
full
so little
screen.
time is everything that you need to say to everyone that you love. So after getting married is when I first started experiencing the headaches, and they were quite severe. And I didn't understand them because I had never had anything like that before in my life. Right when I was diagnosed, my husband and I were actively trying for a family, which is heartbreaking for us both. And then I was diagnosed this past New Year's. We went away to the wine country for kind of a New Year's Eve celebration, and by Jan 1, the following day, I was diagnosed with cancer and told I was terminally ill. I was told I had a grade 2 astrocytoma, and was told anywhere from 3, maybe 5, up to 10 years to live. I have to tell you, when you're 29 years old, being told you have that kind of timeline still feels like you're being told you're going to die tomorrow. 70 days post-op, I went in for another MRI.
That's a big tumor, isn't it?
I had a grade
Look at that
change. They were looking and saying it looks like grade 4, which is the worst and most aggressive form of brain cancer. It's called a glioblastoma. So that was a major shock to my system and the system of my family, because it went from having potentially years of time to being told I had like 6 months. My parents spent a couple months, they just wanted to search for a miracle.
In the beginning, I hoped for everything. First I hoped that they had just the wrong x-rays, the wrong set of scans. It was all just a big clerical mishap. Your brain will do really strange things to you when you don't want to believe something. You will come up with fairy tales.
So she moved to
I
Oregon.
don't wake up every day and look at it. It's in a safe spot, and I know that it's there when I need it.
There it is.
I plan to be surrounded by my immediate family, which is my husband and my mother and my stepfather and my best friend, who's also a physician, and probably not much more people. And I will die upstairs in my bedroom that I share with my husband, with my mother and my husband by my side, and pass peacefully with some music that I like in the background.
Between suffering or being allowed to decide when enough is enough, it just, to me, makes it provides a lot of relief and comfort that, okay, that option is there if and when we decide, or she decides that it's time.
I can't even tell you the
I'm going
amount
to
of
advance
relief
it just a little bit here for time's sake.
in Juneau, and we took this spectacular boat trip. Before I pass, I'm hoping to make it to the Grand Canyon, because I've never been. And that's all I can do, is set little goals like that, and all those things make every day worthwhile.
My hope now is that my daughter can live her life the way she wants to, that she can make the decisions that she wants to, that she can be who she is which is this very autonomous, bright, well-read, well-traveled person who loves adventure. She's kind of got me into this thing where now we've agreed to meet. And so I'm going to go on a traveling adventure. And she's this place like I'm kind of scared to go to, Machu Picchu. A lot of climbing, but she said she'd meet me there. And so damn it, I'll go.
I hope to enjoy however many days I have left on this beautiful earth and spend as much of it outside as I can, surrounded by those I love. I hope to pass in peace. The reason to consider life and what's of value is to make sure you're not missing out. Seize the day. What's important to you? What do you care about? What matters? Pursue that. Forget the rest.
Okay, I'm going to stop it here now. Really have to, oh, I didn't want to do that. You really feel for the mother, don't you, in that? Really feel, especially for her, what she had to go through. Of course, Brittany, that was no fun either, but their mother really pulls my heart anyway. What are some reasons why Brittany decided to do that? And she actually did do it November 1st, 2014. What were some of her reasons?
She wanted to die with dignity.
Right, she wanted to die with dignity.
In her own home.
In her home. Yep.
Her own family.
We already saw that 60% of people don't die in their own homes. Many in intensive care units.
It's like she wanted to die, she wanted to live and die on her own terms.
Right, so autonomy was a big one, was it?
Yeah.
You know, the words I remember from that video is seize the day, right? You know, and she felt if she could no longer seize the day, then life wasn't worth living for her. That actually comes as a quote from Dead Poets Society, Robin Williams. That's kind of ironic, isn't it? Robin Williams ended up taking his own life too. Well, let's take a look at a competing point of view. Well, actually, first of all, here is a summary of some ethical principles that would support physician-assisted suicide, and most of you caught this one right away. Patient autonomy. I have the right to say what happens to my own body. The right to self-determination. That's the dominant ethical principle in medicine today. Patient autonomy. Another reason that's often offered is compassion. Compassion for those who are suffering or who might be expected to suffer. And then there's also another reason offered called utilitarianism. That's an ethical theory that expresses the idea that any act is allowable as long as it results in the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. So many think that allowing PAS would make more people happy because the family would be off the hook, like that poor mother. The husband, Brittany, would not have to suffer. Society would save money, that sort of thing. Now let's take an opposing view. Look at an opposing view. Maggie Carner, who is the director of LCMS Life Ministries, chair of the Sanctity of Human Life Committee, which I sit on. And she, strange but true, was diagnosed with the same exact cancer as Brittany Maynard. Only Maggie was a bit older than Brittany. Brittany was about 30. Maggie was in her 50s or early 50s. But she saw Brittany's video and thought she was going to make a video on her own about that. And she also wrote an article in the Federalist, which appeared. So let's go ahead and get that one started. Again, I'll probably have to cut it short for time purposes.
Hi, Brittany. My name is Maggie Carner. I live in Connecticut. And just like many Americans, I saw your heartbreaking video. And as I watched, my tears quickly turned to sobs because you and I have one big thing in common. I was also diagnosed this past spring with a glioblastoma grade 4 brain tumor. So your video hit pretty close to home for me. The other night I couldn't sleep, so I decided to write this letter to you. Dear Brittany, honestly, I really do get it. I'm a strong woman, just like you, and I understand the horrible fear that you're facing. The scary predictions of what will happen, the loss of control. Even the stupid name of that tumor sounds just as ominous today as it did when I first heard that word in the doctor's office. Brain cancer sucks, in a really big way. It's a beast that lurks and prowls, just waiting for the chance to pounce and take away more of our faculties, our everyday joys, and our very life. But you know what? Death sucks too. It rips us from the people and the passions that we love the most. Remember earlier this year when Robin Williams took his own life? Just shock, all the remembrances on TV. The world lost some of its beauty and joy that day. Brittany, if you take your life, the world will lose some of its beauty again. And quite frankly, I'm not sure this world can spare any more public losses like that, with all the death and destruction going on around us every day. We need the presence of people like you. Please don't let cancer get one more second of your life than it desires. Your video was seen by tons of people around the world. Every day, millions of people, including me, are lifting you up in prayer for your peace and healing. And because of that video, we are all of us are feeling your loss and pain. As a nation, we're all walking right alongside with you. No one is judging, but people are watching. Because your video was so popular, someone told me it's almost like you've stepped out on a ledge and you're ready to jump. But when that happens in real life, we try to talk to that person and we say, no, don't jump, don't jump. We try to explain to them why they're valuable, why we want them here longer. We tell them that there can be a better way. But what would happen if our society decided to yell to that ledge jumper, yeah, you're right, there isn't a better way. Go ahead, jumping is the best solution for you. What would that say about us as a society? So I guess I'm yelling to you, Brittany, on your ledge. I'm asking you to stay with us as long as possible. This is just my desperate attempt to get you to say no to jumping. Don't let that arbitrary date pressure you. You are strong. How about instead, on November 1st, you and I choose to squeeze every drop out of life and cheat this beast of a cancer for as long as we can. And who knows, maybe we can be part of a research trial that leads to a cure for us or others. And in the meantime, we can spend precious moments with the people that we love. When I was a young woman, just a few years older than you, my dad suffered a severe accident and it severed his spinal cord and it left him paralyzed from the neck down. My siblings and I were just horrified by the black hole of fear and uncertainty that was before us. And for 5 months before his death, my dad was cared for by dedicated hospice workers. And during those months, our family had precious time just soaking up the presence of my dad. He couldn't do anything except talk. And quite frankly, I never had that kind of candor and intimacy with my dad before those days. My brothers and sisters and I, we learned more about ourselves and each other than we ever could have in any other way. We grew as a family and we learned about sacrifice and love. Each of us became wiser and better people through that whole experience. So really, in essence, it was a gift that my dad gave to us. Brittany, I ask that you allow your family this gift of caring for you in your cancer journey. Like you, Brittany, I'm apprehensive. I know the predictions. I know what's ahead for me, and possibly for you. But we're still here, aren't we? We haven't squeezed out every drop of life left in us yet. So Brittany, please don't leave us yet. Let's choose life for as long as we've got it. L'chaim, to life.
Okay, that's Maggie's video. See if I can bring that PowerPoint back up here. There we go. So what were some of Maggie's, by the way, does anyone know what happened in Maggie's case? She did pass away. She passed away, I believe, fall 2015. In fact, they had a memorial service for her at Concordia Seminary, Theological Seminary in Fort Wayne in her honor, and they actually granted her an honorary doctorate degree. So a lot of people thought good things about her, not only during her career, but especially at the end of her life here, where she, had to deal with these issues, and then she still kept fighting. But what reasons did Maggie choose not to request physician-assisted suicide? What were some of her reasons not to do this, in contrast to Brittany?
Give to her family?
Yeah, be with her family. That she thought it was actually good for her daughters to go through this, like it was good for her to go through that with her dad. Yes?
Conceiving into cancer when you choose to
Yeah. Don't give into it. Don't give into this evil thing. Right. Anything else?
Enjoy life to the fullest every minute of every day.
Yeah. See, every moment is precious as a gift of God, I'm sure she would say, would have said. Any other reason? One more reason? Yeah, she chose life. And then, too, she thought maybe she could participate in a clinical trial that maybe not benefit her, but might benefit people down the road. In fact, she did that. And actually, she saw some improvement for a while. And there's just some amazing things now being done with that type of cancer, with the polio virus, believe it or not, curing that kind of cancer. Isn't that amazing? Yes.
It's like she had the responsibility to add beauty to the world.
Mm-hmm. Right. As long as she possibly could. Right. Yes.
Was one, she of course was a Christian. Do you know anything about the other lady? Did she have
I don't know what her background is. I think she was an agnostic. I'm not sure she adhered to any religion, but that's what I heard, anecdotal evidence. I'm not sure. Does anybody here know what Brittany was? If she
That can make a big
belonged to a
difference.
religion? Pardon?
That can make a big difference.
Yes, I think it does. Yeah, definitely.
To follow up on that, you had numbers for, I think, Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
Do they do religious surveys in that? You said they had bachelor's degrees and all that, but do they do kind of?
I didn't see any of that in the statistics, but wasn't looking for that either. But all the statistics are published online, so you can check that out. But there that would make an interesting study. There's none that I'm aware of, but that doesn't mean they didn't exist. But it would be interesting to see if there's a correlation between religious beliefs and propensity for physician-assisted suicide. Yeah, that would be interesting. So what are some cautions? I'll just wrap this up, and then we'll have some question and answers. But just to put a kind of a capstone on this, what are some cautions then for a physician-assisted suicide? Well, one author has divided the opposition into three groups. One group objects to the fact that physicians are involved, as we saw before in the Hippocratic Oath, that traditional medical ethics prohibits physician-assisted suicide or euthanasia. That's up here. The second group doesn't necessarily believe PAS is always wrong, but has reservations because of social implications. They would say that autonomy and mercy, those two strong arguments for PAS, make it highly unlikely society will stop with modest proposals of PAS, and some actually view Oregon's model as modest. That's called a slippery slope argument. And some could assert that maybe that's where Belgium has gone. Maybe they start that trek down the slippery slope. And then some people are also concerned about the likelihood of abuse, neglect, and mistake. Minority groups are particularly concerned because they feel they're the ones that are going to be pressured into doing this to save money for society. That they're not a burden on society. Or studies have shown that, unfortunately, primary care physicians, I'm not talking about psychiatrists here, but primary care physicians don't have the tools to correctly diagnose and treat clinical depression. As we saw, not many cases are referred to counseling. Difficulty in monitoring PAS, and then a huge concern by hospice programs. They're afraid that states that implement PAS will have a negative impact on hospice programs, which was already extolled by the previous speaker. And then the third group that opposes PAS opposes it on religious grounds. And I'll just go through this, and Dr. Bierman will go through this in much more content-rich fashion. Society today sees death as a natural thing, part of the circle of life. In fact, I teach ethics to nurses in training, and then I'll ask them, well, how do you approach an end-of-life situation like that? And then some of them say, well, we'll make them feel better. We'll just say death is just a part of the circle of life. And I wonder if that really makes them feel better. You know, that, oh, this bad thing I'm experiencing, don't worry about it, it's kind of a natural thing. Where does that come from anyway, that idea that death is a part of the circle of life? Anybody know? The Lion King. Where did they get it from? This might surprise you. Paganism. That's essentially an idea, and also Eastern religions as well. Whereas the Bible refers to death as an enemy, the result of sin which was defeated at great cost by our Lord on the cross. John Pless said, society tends to see death only as an aspect of science or biology, not as a spiritual matter. And that's one thing that physicians are starting to recognize, that death is not just science, it's also spiritual. Since suffering cannot be thoroughly addressed by modern medicine, some people feel the best way to get rid of suffering is to eliminate the sufferer. Dr. Iyer stated that. Is this really death with dignity? Well, John Pless asserts that even though autonomy and mercy, assert that this is the way, we have control over death, Easter robs death of the dignity it claims for itself. We're freed from the mythologies of our culture that would seek to give us power over death. Easter gives us something far better. It gives us a sure and certain word: Jesus died for your sins. God has raised him from the dead. The grave cannot hold him, and neither will it be able to keep those who are his. So Easter gives death its dignity, not something we attempt to do. Last quote from Gilbert Mylander: Christians have held that suicide is morally wrong because they have seen in it a contradiction of our nature as creatures, an unwillingness to receive life moment by moment from the hand of God without ever regarding it as simply our possession. We are dependent beings, and to think otherwise, to make independence as our project, however sincerely, is to live a lie, to fly in the face of reality. So some clear words from Dr. Mylander on his perspective on that. By the way, Roman Catholic Church, ethical and religious directives for Roman Catholic healthcare. All Catholic hospitals have to subscribe to this and operate on it. Point 60, euthanasia is an action or omission that of itself or by its intention causes death in order to alleviate suffering. Catholic healthcare institutions may never condone or participate in euthanasia or assisted suicide in any way. Dying patients who request euthanasia should receive loving care, psychological and spiritual support, appropriate remedies for pain and other symptoms so they can live with dignity until the time of natural death. So Roman Catholic healthcare facilities also cannot participate in that. So I'm going to just go ahead and to the last slide here because we're short of time. That's actually Maggie at the time she received her honorary doctorate, and I was able to be there with her. That was at the Life March in 2015. So thank you very much for having me here this morning. Sure, if we have time.
Questions and comments for Dr. Voss? And again, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Are the medicines that they give these patients, are they pill form that they take?
Yeah, it's usually pill form, yeah.
Do you know what they are?
They're an overdose of barbiturates, and then sometimes they put in some other drugs or minerals like calcium or potassium, because that will make it irreversible. Because an overdose of calcium affects your heart and how it beats. So it's just like very similar to the solution your veterinarian uses to euthanize animals, which of course, being a veterinarian, I've done. Or the only person in this room that's actually euthanized a living entity. And so we have medication just like that. So it's irreversible. but yet it's injected intravenously, so it's instantaneous. Now, physician-assisted suicide is not instantaneous. As you saw, it can take up to 3 hours if everything goes right. It doesn't always. Yes.
Why would people go through all of this rather than just committing suicide?
Well, yeah, that'd be something to actually ask them, but I think they probably see it as more ethically acceptable because it's legal. You know, for some people, what's legal is ethical, you know, like the abortion debate. Once it was legalized, more people took advantage of it than ever before. And so that's probably part of it. They maybe think of it as at least someone's helping me. You know, I don't want to, you know, try this on my own and mess it up.
My doctor.
Yeah, and my doctor will help. But not all doctors participate in this. Only about 100 doctors in the whole state of Oregon out of probably 10,000, I would guess. So most doctors don't participate in this. So that might be part of it too. Maybe they don't want to deface themselves either by, you know, shooting themselves or something. They want to look in death like they are in life. So I'm sure there are a bunch of reasons. Yes?
Do you happen to know life insurance generally doesn't pay for suicide? How life insurance is that?
I would probably guess. Now, I couldn't say for sure. Maybe someone here knows, but I'd venture to say in those states where it's legalized, it's no longer considered a crime, so I think it would have to be accepted by life insurance companies. Yeah, but that is a good question. I'll have to ask my attorney friend that question who teaches in our certificate program. But I would venture to say it probably is. They couldn't exclude it any longer. Yes.
You talked about how physician-assisted suicide is legal in several states, but euthanasia isn't. Why is there an ethical distinction made between the doctor just prescribing you the drug and the doctor administering it himself?
Well, that's an interesting question because from my point of view, they're both objectionable. And I think from the biblical point of view, you know, I would say they're both objectionable, and Dr. Bierman will get into that. But I think there is a clear ethical distinction from a practical point of view. In physician-assisted suicide, the patient is the one doing the action, taking his or her life. The physician only gives the means. Whereas in euthanasia, the doctor, him or herself, is doing the killing. And most people feel that if doctors are engaged in actually killing patients, it will have a definite negative impact against the whole profession of medicine. For one thing, patients will not fully trust maybe their physicians after that. And then they want to be seen as lifesavers and pain easers, if you will, not as taking people's lives. So I think there is a significant ethical distinction there. For me, from a practical point of view, I think that euthanasia is more morally objectionable than physician-assisted suicide, although I oppose both. The Bible would oppose both. In fact, that's why it's in the Hippocratic Oath. Did you wonder that? Why is abortion and euthanasia prohibited in the Hippocratic Oath? That was in the Greek society, and they accepted infanticide, and they took their own lives when things were going wrong. Why was that prohibited in the Hippocratic Oath? Were they Christians? No. Christ, that was before the time of Christ. The main reason was really a utilitarian reason. Because again, they wanted the profession of medicine to be honored and respected, and they wanted to stay out of any perception of causing death. That was the real reason. It was a practical reason, pragmatic reason, if you will. Any other, yes?
On that form, it said something about you can change this at any time.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't say until after you die.
No.
Was it written for that, or was it just an oversight?
No, it's in keeping with autonomy and informed consent. The same principle holds true that a patient has a right to change his or her mind at any time. It's actually grounded all the way back in the Nuremberg Code written during the time after World War II about the atrocities committed in concentration camps where prisoners had no choice to continue with these heinous experiments. And so one of the principles of the Nuremberg Code was that the subject has a right to withdraw from the experiment at any time. And that same principle was carried over into informed consent that we have today in clinical practice, and then from there it was pulled into that. So there can't be a perception a patient is forced to do this. Although some people are concerned, and why they're opposing that, because they are afraid that they will be coerced, like minority groups, that they will be coerced into this. Any other?
Let's
Okay,
Dr.
thank
Voss
you.
again.